music of the Jesuit Music Ministry. Enjoy different mood playlists from ACS, Bukas Palad, Hangad, Kimi Kesuita, Musika Kiesa, and many more. Click on the link to learn more.
Radyo-Katipunan, 87.9 FM. Radyo-Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle. Mamangha sa lalim at ganda ng ating kultura at diwang makabayan sa mga salita at pahina. Sa tulong ng mga guro at manunulat ng panitikang Pilipino, halina't tuklasin ang yaman ng ating panitikan, ang pamana ng ating lahi. Kasama si Binibining Andrea Trinidad, Ginoong Alvin Yapan at Ginoong Gary De Viles ng Kagawaran ng Filipino ng Pamantasang Ateneo de Manila. Ito ang Sari-Sari.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are fortunate to have with us this afternoon contemporary romance writer Mina Esguerra for our webinar series in Sari-Sari radyo-katipunan in 7.9. Before we proceed, may we please remind everyone to set the microphones on throughout the duration of the talk. Microphones off. Sorry, nagbabasa lang dito. During the audio forum, we can use either the chat box or send raise hands so that we can acknowledge. I'm Gary DeVillas, your host for today's event. And with me is Dr. Alvin Yapan and
Okay, the signal from Gary is a bit choppy. Hopefully, you can survive this 2-hour lecture if it gets to that. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. The topic for this Sari-Saring Usapan online lecture is reading and teaching Filipino chick lit and contemporary romance. Let me introduce our guest lecturer, Ms. Mina V. Esguerra. Ms. Esguerra writes and publishes romance novels. Her young adult/fantasy trilogy, Interim Goddess of Love, is a college love story featuring gods from Philippine mythology. Her contemporary romance novellas won the Filipino Reader's Choice Awards for Chick Lit in 2012, that's titled Fairy Tale Fail, and 2013, titled That Kind of Guy. In 2013, she founded #Romance Class, a community of Filipino authors of romance in English, and it has since helped over 80 authors write and publish over 100 books. So congratulations on that. She is also a media adaptation agent working with LA-based Bold MP to develop romance media by Filipino creatives for an international audience. Visit minavesguerra.com for more information about her books and projects. Everyone, let us welcome Miss Mina V. Esguerra. Yay! Thank you, Mina, for saying yes to our invitation.
Thank you so much for inviting me and asking me to talk about this particular topic, which is close to my heart. So I have some prepared remarks. I will be reading from a document. You can ask questions and I will answer them at the end. So I will start. So hello, everyone. My name is Mina V. Esguerra, and I am here to talk about reading and teaching Filipino chick lit and contemporary romance. Like you care, like you mean it, like you respect it. I am a romance author and publisher. My first book was published in 2009. Since then, I have written and published 25 standalone books, mainly in the subgenre of contemporary romance in English, and my work often features Filipino characters. My background, I have degrees in AB Communication from Ateneo de Manila University and a Master's in Development Communication from the University of the Philippines. Before releasing my first book, I had already worked 10 years in editorial and web publishing, including a career as a consultant tasked to build international online communities for development. I've been a published author for 12 years. I've been a publisher of romance books for 11 years. I founded the writing community Romance Class 8 years ago. And my latest job is that I am now a media adaptation agent representing books written by the Romance Class community, and it's a community of Filipino authors. Before I proceed, I'm going to define some terms that I will be using. When I say chick lit, I mean that the book has a female main character and the plot is about her life, her goals, and her happiness. When I say Filipino chick lit, the main character of the book is Filipino, but it may be written in English. When I say contemporary romance, when I say Filipino contemporary romance, the main characters are Filipino and the main plot is romance, but the book may be written in English. When I talk about romance, it means that the book has romance as its main plot, not subplot, not accompanying plot, but the main plot. And it has a required happy ending, meaning that the characters choose each other in the end. In the industry, that has been called emotional justice. So romance has emotional justice as a requirement. The 21st century contemporary Philippine literature modules that I've seen that have featured my book under chick lit, they're actually no longer relevant if they mean the books released in the early 2000s, usually color pink, usually with cute vector art, because Philippine publishers have stopped publishing this altogether. When invited to speak at a DepEd teacher training session for senior high school at PNU in 2017, I talked about this and said that to keep this part of the module current, they'll need to consider contemporary romance and young adult, which is what publishers and authors of chick lit moved on to by 2012. Now, most of us write romance. I founded a romance writing community in 2013, and it's called #RomanceClass. Since then, we've helped over 80 Filipino authors publish over 100 books. We write in English and we sell these books in print and digital and audio available to a worldwide audience. Romance is a billion-dollar industry worldwide, with a readership in the reported millions. In the Philippines, we have a readership in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, actually. We can know this because reports are available, book sales, surveys, and analytics from sites like Wattpad. In 2020, during lockdown, I released a new book, my 25th, and experienced my best ever release day sales. In 2020, my Wattpad account actually gained 24,000 new followers, most of them following me during ECQ. In terms of books written, books sold, and books read, romance by Filipino authors is thriving, and I see that in every publishing space that I'm present in. The genre and its authors deserve a place in the study of 21st century Philippine literature. We also deserve respect. For a romance reader and writer, the disrespect can be avoided if you join the right communities, which is why we've formed ours, and keep it as welcoming and safe as we can. The disrespect we routinely experience is coming from classrooms, and all connected to this institution. It's in class discussions where people routinely discuss the validity of a genre they obviously don't read. It's in writers' workshops where romance authors are not invited to submit actual romance. It's in awards where there are no romance categories or romance doesn't get to compete. It's in faculties where no one teaches or specializes in romance scholarship. It's in class assignments where books are chosen for convenience rather than content and copies are not provided. It's in modules where the activity doesn't require reading the book, but a report that predicts the ending because they don't intend to supply the full book or even read it. So it makes us ask, what's the point? Am I expecting too much? If you teach this differently already and you actually care and you respect the work that we do, thank you so much. It's possible that I'm seeing the worst version of this because I attend these events and often have to hear the complaining about popular literature and I write a popular genre. Maybe it's because I'm also seeing it from my email inbox, where students email me asking for help with their assignments. I used to think they were lazy, but after a while, I noticed that the requests were similar. One common request was, "What's the ending of my imaginary ex?" That's my book. And that question was sent to me more than once. I have a Google alert for the title of my book and saw that question appear in online forums where students crowdsource answers for their homework. That led me to find at least two schools using modules where indeed there was one chapter of my book and an assignment to predict the ending. I am currently the only publisher of my imaginary ex, and I have not received any order from any school that is apparently teaching my book to their senior high school students. Is it too much to expect that a school have a copy of a book that they've included in their subject? To expect that teachers at least know how it ends? Because there's no need to predict an ending in a romance. Knowing the genre's definition gives you the ending. What is there to predict? Is this an unreasonable thing to ask for? Apart from my own personal experience, there is a documented disrespect of the romance and chick lit genres, and people have suggested strongly that it's because it is associated with women writers. If the genres are included in a course about Philippine literature and people teaching it feel that they can, even though they don't read it or study it, then that's a problem because it is possible to not be qualified to teach this. Maybe other genres also have this problem, and we can find solutions to help build capacity, not just for my genre, but others too. I don't actually expect every single literature teacher to be a romance genre expert, but there are ways where we can help you. Some of my suggestions, if you are not an expert and would like to still enrich your class discussions. Number one, choose books with intention. I have 25 published books, and the book of mine that is included in modules for several schools is not what I would have chosen to represent the genre for a Filipino chick lit. I believe it was chosen out of convenience or the original module author's familiarity with it, and I'm thankful for the inclusion, but it's not what I would recommend as an impactful and representative book. I know many books, and I'm willing to give anyone who asks a list. You can tell me based on your goals for your class and their age group, for example, and I can provide a list for you. Number two, understand the genre. I mentioned at the beginning the basics of chick lit and romance. It would be great if that was how every discussion starts, so people are not studying books looking for things that the books are not meant to have. Number three, recognize the gaps in the material you've been given. I am willing to provide or find recommendation lists, copies of books, speakers, workshops. We can try to do this in a way that is least stressful for everyone. My community has pre-recorded author talks. Some of us have put entire books free on Wattpad or can provide copies and discussion questions. Students don't have to email us asking for copies or answers to their homework. I also have some suggestions for the activities and discussion section of the course, which I see that the modules actually have. Because again, I find it useless to ask students to predict the ending of a book that actually has an ending. There are other questions also that I've seen that miss the point. For example, a question that misses the point. Can you relate to the main character? This kind of question invites judgment and moralizing. Our books are known for its focus on relationships and empathy. Maybe let's actually teach it with empathy. It's better to ask students how and in which ways they relate to the main character's similarities, maybe, rather than differences and judgments. Number two, questions that miss the point. Was the main character selfish? If the book is chick lit and the main character is a woman who, as defined by the genre, is on her own personal journey, it still never fails to come up in discussions whether she's being selfish for following her personal journey. Again, please remember that these books were written with the intention of exploring a woman's choices. Make your classroom a space of safety and empathy in discussing these books. Number 3, questions that miss the point. Was there too much romance? A grad student did a paper on my work and asked me to send her a selection of my books. I did that. And she got back to me saying, did I have anything that didn't have too much romance? Because she noticed that my books have too much romance. I'm a romance author. When a book fulfills the requirements of the genre, it fulfills the requirements of the genre. When it doesn't, then it's a failure. I hope we're not disrespecting books inadvertently, but when they actually fulfill their main goal, hoping that it fails its genre to be liked by you misses the point. When we get stuck on these basic first level topics, then we don't have time for more interesting ones. I'll give you examples of some more interesting discussion points, which is something that you would see in a forum that regularly discusses romance. So they get all of these basic questions out of the way and go into really interesting things. For example, number 1, is this man a romance hero or just a decent human being? And can we actually tell the difference? So you can apply that to a lot of books and see the kind of discussion, the lively discussion that comes from it. Number 2, another suggestion, is this true love or do they have no other choice in an abusive environment? We want to be able to question if we are actually seeing a functional relationship or one that is out of desperation. That is something we can talk about with these books. Number 3, is this an empowered choice or only a fulfillment of unfair obligations? When a book, for example, portrays a woman who chooses herself rather than her family, we can discuss that. We can discuss why we feel that she is either selfish or has failed the reader somehow. We can and should discuss that. Number 4, who is the villain of this story and what does this say about the power structures in our lives? What does the story say about giving in or fighting back? In romance, for example, the conflict is very telling. Sometimes society is the conflict, sometimes the family. It is an existing power structure, and we see with the ending what the author says about whether we uphold this oppressive structure or we destroy it. It is this can be something we discuss in romance books. So this is just a few of the many more interesting discussions we can have once we treat chick lit and romance books with respect. This part of the study of 21st century Philippine literature can be an exciting, wonderful space to discuss books that are very accessible and already well loved and are about issues of identity, coming of age, sex, the patriarchy, family obligations, society's expectations, functional relationships, mental health, and so much more. These are things that matter so much to your students, and that's why they're the largest demographic for our books everywhere, all the time. I teach and hold workshops, just not in this particular setting. But as I said, I'm willing to help and make things better and easier for everyone. I'm glad to have been invited here today and will take your questions and requests if you have them. Thank you so much.
Maraming salamat, Mina. Ayun, who wants to go first?
Maybe I'll start. Sige,
Sige, Gary.
Anne, you have, okay. Thank you, Mina, for that. No, really wonderful that you're able to give all these suggestions on how to, especially in this pandemic. You can understand teachers are really trying their best, to come up with resources, and some of these are not really available online. So they were, so, and I can understand, why, but I'm just curious, were they doing this even before pandemic, kasi ibang usapan yun. But they were,
the
Yeah.
the modules that I've seen, the problems that I was pointing out,
Right.
they were around before the pandemic.
Oh my god. So
Yes,
there must be okay.
it is
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
It is a problem that persisted, I
That's
guess.
yeah. I guess so. We need to address that too.
Do you go after them, Mina? Those who use your novels in their class but do not ask for copyright?
I have approached
Mhm,
a certain body and asked what
mhm,
can be done about it. But
mhm.
I think at this time it's difficult to make that a priority. um,
Yes, because we're still
Yeah.
trying to promote the genre.
yeah, and
And
also I actually don't uh I
Yeah.
don't particularly feel like penalizing anyone
yeah,
who wants to read this. I want to see what can be
Right.
done instead for in terms of access and
yeah.
giving teachers what they need
Right.
rather
Yeah.
than I don't know what action would be taken if
Yes.
I
I mean,
act.
any author I think would also say the same. I mean, it's better for them to ask yes. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we'd always say yes anyway,
Yes.
just as long as you are informed that they're
Mhm.
using your material in their classes.
And I
So
happen
maybe
to
that's
be
the
the
point.
publisher, so
Mhm.
I don't need to escalate it to anybody else.
Yes.
I get to decide, and yes, I will give access and I will give resources. But we're not asked. That's the thing.
Mm, that's the
Mhm.
problem. Anyway, Gary,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. So that's one problem that I want to stress. We're into this. We're all into this. Okay. It's really difficult to write modules now, but writers are available. I mean, if you really ask for help, so it would be better to have this kind of conversation. Open conversation with writers. That we also ask, to the authors, and then ask the authors
it's a bit
Yeah.
is
choppy,
to explain the
Gary.
work of the department. Sorry,
Oh, we didn't get to hear your last few sentences, so we didn't
uh,
get any. Uh,
yeah. So nangyayari din ito
a lot.
sa atin, no, sa Filipino department, no? Kasi copy pa,
Yeah.
nawawala.
Naintindihan mo, Ann?
Hindi po masyado. Pero we have 30 participants in the room. So if you have any questions, please
Yeah.
feel free to type them out in our Zoom chat box. Or you
Sige.
may also send raise hand signal so that we can acknowledge you. So feel free.
Ayun.
So yung last
I
question
have a
ko na
question.
lang,
Ayan.
Go.
Mina,
Go ahead.
ayan, okay. So yung last question ko is yung gaano karami yung in terms of representation ng mga babae, ng chick lit, ng characters, female characters, how wide or is the spectrum, of these characters, in terms of identification, o nag-gravitate lang ba ito with uh, a few Catholic girls, or schoolgirls in a Catholic school. So, gano'ng karami na yung representation, as far as chick literature is concerned, romance literature is concerned.
That's great. That's a wonderful question, and yes, definitely. I think that's one of the questions that should be discussed in every class when they in this particular course, because that was the criticism of the books when I was first published. There was a directive to have the books be about a certain type of woman and look a certain type of way, and it was very cosmopolitan. It was very modern, and the criticism of the books, including mine, often does include parang where are the other types of women, other queer women, women of a different religion or social background, and that's what we did with our community, because what happened was it those are fair evaluations and critiques, I think. But what we decided as a community was it's not up to me or one individual author to represent everyone. What we do is we expand the community and tell the people to write the kind of character they feel is missing. It's difficult, but it's
Yeah.
difficult kasi so what's happened is I said we've helped over 80 authors, but a lot of these authors are writing a certain kind of character, college educated, living in Manila. We had to actually issue so the name of the community is Romance Class because it started as an actual class. So what we did was it's an online class, and what we started to do when we became more aware of this was to issue challenges. So we have challenges per class, like no one write or submit anything set in Manila, not no Manila. And then there was a time when there was a challenge. There was a challenge for a particular anthology that only queer lit, only queer romance. No one can submit. No one should be straight in any of these stories. So we have to do that. We have to. And then when someone wants to write something particularly close to their heart, so something like a plus size main character, or we have a book that's actually been reviewed and internationally that is innovative even in international romance. It's called Yumi US by Bridget Bautista. The romance there, it's female, and it's between a sex worker and an endo sales clerk who are roommates in the Malate area in Manila. So but again, we have to encourage people to do that. We can't tell somebody who doesn't have we try not to tell somebody who has a totally different kind of experience and a totally different way of writing to suddenly write this just because it's missing. We were asking people who felt it was missing because it was them, their own representation that they felt missing, that we invited to write. And we issue challenges and we support. And part of the community support is that when the person actually writes the book and finishes it, we will support it. We will make sure when it's released, you have people buying the book, you have people promoting it. And but if anyone's ever tried to write a book, that's a long way to.
Yeah.
That's still a journey. It's not easy.
Just a follow up, Mina. So I'm just curious, how's the response so far to the challenge to write in other representations?
It's usually wonderful, and it usually brings results because. And it depends on the kind of incentive you offer. So we've done that before, where we partnered with corporate, where if you make it all the way to the end of the class, you might get a print deal, or you might get
Wonderful.
you might get some sort of sponsorship, and it works for people. It motivates them. So if whenever I'm asked to give talks about this, like filling gaps in representation, that's what I say. You have to just give people an incentive, whatever it is. They will write it or force themselves to, because it depends on the reward that you're offering
And there's
them.
space, and there's an opportunity. There's space for them to do it.
Yes. So, and the difficulty there, though, is making sure that the right people know that this opportunity exists. You don't want people taking advantage of something that's supposed to be for somebody else. That's all. But actually, that's not so much a problem, because there's so much that's missing. We really just want a lot of people to be writing. Yes.
Yes. Anne, mukhang may tanong sa sa chat.
Yes. So far, meron po tayo dito.
Follow-up lang.
May follow-up
Sorry.
yata si Guy.
Yes. Go, Sir Guy.
Yeah, follow-up lang. As a genre, does it breed with other genres? Pwede bang maging chick lit, then manga, or
crossovers
or comics, crossovers, or meron bang ganon? Is it also part of not only characters? Imagine, I'm just saying that not only characters, but as far as genre itself,
the production,
or it can be a film, animation, chick lit, then animation. I'm just curious.
I have several ways to answer that question, I guess. Like, in terms of literary genres alone, we found that a lot of people who started with writing romance and chick lit uh, have done really well publishing poetry. So we have people like Don Lanuza who started out as a romance writer with us, and then eventually, because she knows how to self-publish already, ended up taking a side project that was poetry and then self-publishing it online and becoming an Amazon bestseller and being picked up by an international poetry publisher. So there are, I mean, it's because it's related, and the audience is probably a shared audience somehow. So so it's a good transition. So that's a good career for an author. In terms of the work themselves, how they can cross to other media. So that's actually my new job right now. It's finding partnerships where, yes, definitely with the books that the authors created, that's their intellectual property, and it exists as a book. They'll always have it and they'll always own it. By the way, if you join romance class community, we're not a publisher. We actually just help people and encourage them through the writing process, and then at the end of it we teach you how to publish it. So you still have to do the publishing part if you choose to. So I don't actually own any literary publishing rights for any of these books, but what we try to do, because there's interest now internationally for more diverse content, and that's us, because we're Filipinos and we've been producing romance content here forever. Those are always the best-selling movies and the best-selling books. But for an international audience that we have not been catering to, our books actually are a fit. So yes, we're talking about adaptations. We've been Every time I visit Comiket, I'm always there's I always see somebody who says, let's just do romance comics, romance manga. It's but again, it's all the ideas are there, people are willing, but it's always time and being able to devote time and hopefully money to sponsor someone like this, or to actually take someone's time and have them just devote their time to something like this. There's so much potential actually that's not met because we don't have time, space, energy for and money for all these possible
Resources.
things. Yes.
Anyway, siguro ayon sa chat, there are those who
Yes, sir. Or can we
gave their
accommodate
questions.
one more follow-up question? Kasi naisip ko lang din po, because Sir Gary earlier has mentioned something about genre, romance, and film. And I kind of remembered how learners nowadays are more visual, especially during the age of Netflix and online streaming. So do you have any movie recommendations, Mina, that can serve somehow as supplementary materials for students to grasp what chick lit or romance is? Like
That's the thing.
local Filipino
That's that's a thing we do. That's a thing we started doing in the pandemic, because usually we would have events or book clubs, and then suddenly we can't meet. So yes, we would do that. I would recommend personally Isa Pa With Feelings. Isa Pa With Feeling. Isa Pa With Feeling, which is a recent movie uh, with with because it's legitimately a romance, meaning the plot is about them getting together and they do choose each other in the end. Plus, there is a wonderful introduction of disability and how people in relationships with someone who is not disabled have to deal with it. I like that. I recently liked something like The House of Us. Kathniel, Kathniel, The House of Us. I think it's really interesting because it's a little different. I grew up reading, more of watching, I guess. My writer's journey involved watching a lot of John Lloyd movies, and I think a lot of the movies in our past did not do a particularly interesting or thoughtful job about those discussions on what we expect of women in relationships and how they're put through so much for what. So, but I think books lately and movies are doing a better job at that, and we should talk about it. Yes. And if but I like to say, even if the material is lacking, the discussion can make up for it. So even if yun, like the module, for example, choosing a book that I wouldn't have chosen, I think it can be saved in the discussion. We can offer better discussion points maybe if the resources are not available. But isa pa with feelings and and the House of Us.
Yeah, maybe we can proceed. Ay, Sherwin, you're on mute.
Sabi ko si Carlo Aquino and si Maine Mendoza, yung isa pa with
Yes,
feeling.
interesting.
Favorite
Oo.
book of all time now. Anyway.
Yan.
Yeah. So maybe we can proceed. We have numerous questions here in the chat box. For the benefit of the radio, I'm gonna read them out loud. So first is from Miss Catherine Yu. Good afternoon, ma'am. I was just wondering where you usually find your inspiration when writing.
Thank you for the question. My inspiration comes from chismis and from actually, yeah, that was the beginning. Chismis, like speculating about people's lives and my own life. What if it had gone this way? What if it happened this way for somebody else? So that was the first inspiration. Later on, because that can only go so far. That's probably the beginning of inspiration. But later, when you're building a writing career, I had to really think about what I wanted to do and what the work would eventually show. And that's when I discovered that there's so much missing, exactly, in terms of representation, in terms of the kind of stories, especially when we have pretty much dismissed romance and chick lit as being about only one kind of shallow person. And as a writer, it was a nice challenge to be inspired by writing about inspirational people, actually.
Okay, so in relation to the earlier question about writing, we have another question from Caitlin Atienza. I was wondering what particularly inspired you to write chick lit books rather than other genres, and how important is it that the particular genre is discussed as well in an academic setting?
Thank you for the question. The truth of it was that when I started thinking about writing a novel to be published, chick lit was the most viable genre for a woman like me to be published in. It was very popular. They were soliciting books. I did have the experience of being a working woman in Makati, and it fit the profile of the kind of book that they wanted. And that's how I got started. It wasn't really a thing that I was dreaming about since I was a kid. This was something that I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and sometimes it's like that. Later on, though, I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed the email from readers that I was getting, that this was actually resonating with them. And that's why I continued, even when publishers decided it was no longer viable and stopped publishing it. I found a way to publish it myself. I think it's important to be discussed because so many of us actually, as I discovered my writing community, stop writing about ourselves when in the academic setting we're told that our stories don't matter, or it's too shallow, or no one wants to read about a person who is working. And then of course we now know that there's so many issues, like it's in terms of mental health, in terms of like people who look fine and look like they have everything. There's a lot going on in their heads. And that's actually a lot of chick lit. That's a lot of what chick lit was exploring that we actually never get to talk about in a classroom.
Yes, masingit lang ako, just to elaborate on that, just sa follow-up to that, Mina. Yung earlier on, when you were introducing the topic, you mentioned this term, emotional justice, as one of the things that you look for in chick lit, in romance novels. And I love the term. I know it's being used also in other types of writing. But how did you come up with this kind of parameter in terms of what you look for in this genre? When I guess what you mean by emotional justice. How did you come upon this kind of term?
So emotional justice is actually the term used by the Romance Writers of America's Association. So that's the largest, it's probably the largest romance writers association in the world. And they had put forth the definition of the genre as main plot is romance and provides emotional justice. So the term comes from them. We have, of course, interpreted it as the happy ending. But I think in recent years, if you follow a certain type of romance writer who actually writes about injustice, and yes, there's a lot of people writing about injustice in romance. So emotional justice is not just that now you're marrying this rich guy. There is also, it is also essential in the writing, in the story, and in the book that justice is part of it, and it's very satisfying to read. It is, especially maybe in these times. It is.
Yeah.
It is satisfying to see people get what they deserve and the love they deserve.
Yes. I think it's in the resolution, how you negotiate the resolution of the
There
character.
is I mean, I know that people have a lot of problems with romance, and I think that because it doesn't provide emotional justice is the problem. You don't like, for example, the fact that these people maybe hurt each other in such a way that cannot be redeemed, and then they still get together in the end. Is a problem because there was no justice. You didn't feel it. It wasn't resolved in the story. If there is, for example, a lot of discussion about romance where the hero is a billionaire, because there's no ethical billionaire. There's no. It's like, what? How do you resolve this? How do I root for you when you love this person but you're exploiting countless others? I mean, there's no justice. It's not a satisfying
That's very
story.
difficult to write about, Mina,
And we
di ba? I
and
mean,
we can critique that.
yeah.
It's okay. You can you can say that in
Oo.
you can say that. It's fine.
Kumbaga sa dami ng problema ngayon, parang it's so difficult to come up with a satisfying resolution for any character for that matter. So it's really emotional justice in that way. Yun na dapat maniwala ako doon sa sa happy ending mo.
And
Kung hindi ako maniwala diyan, that's not just.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, Anne?
Yes. Dito naman po, regarding our next question, sa palagay ko, may relationship po ito dun sa nabanggit kanina ni Sir Gary na crossovers, especially nung nabanggit na yung manga bilang isang type of material. So, from Ms. Grazel Latiza, paano po kaya maaaring tulungan, maiset ang isipan ng mga students sa Filipino chick lit? Kadalasan po kasi nahihirapan ng students na tanggapin ito dahil sa tingin nila ay kumukopya tayo ng ideya sa Japanese anime.
That's so interesting to me because I think when I was encountering this, the criticism would be, aren't you just copying American romance, or aren't you just copying British chick lit? So I think that issue itself is an interesting discussion. Maybe we can step back and rather than let's make that part of the discussion. Why is it that this is not seen as our story? Why is this not seen as our form? What is it that we're exposed to that makes people think that we're copying rather than adapting, or rather than making something our own? But also, yes, definitely we should be able to choose material that is a good representation. Maybe something because that's I keep talking about I love what I read, but I grew up reading American books. So it's a flaw. It's built in. I have no defense for it. I know I write this because I grew up reading a foreign form, and that's part of the discussion. Maybe we should be talking about what everyone is growing up reading and what can be considered ours. I will think about this. I'm not very particularly versed in Japanese anime, but I have friends who are, and they can probably recommend something that can be a good starting point for discussion. And of course, again, the point is not to say to give a work and then say this is the best thing ever. It's not a copy, and we can discuss, we can criticize, and we can discuss. And discussions like this were the kind of talking about it that I felt, rather than be defensive about what we've done, have led us to actually make better things and look for others who can fill the gaps.
So I'm picking up the next question from Miss Monica Sugay because I think that it's kind of related to the issue of genre and transnational forms. Given the prevalence of fan fiction, especially romantic fanfics online, have these had any positive or negative impact on the writing or on the romance writing community?
I used to write romantic fanfic, so so my answer is it helps. It's not negative to me. I actually am in the middle of discussing this with my community because we're going to record a podcast episode specifically on how fanfic influenced us, and it's I think it's more of a publishing and author career question, whether you're going to leave fanfic behind and then write your own original fiction. But as a reader, I think all of it is helpful, and all of it can be critiqued, and all of it can be discussed. There's a lot of problematic stuff out there. There's a lot of good stuff also. So you can really talk about this forever and design entire interesting discussions about this. But definitely I'm acknowledging that fanfic is overall positive in terms of helping authors work on their skills and give people something to read.
For our next question, it has something to do with writing as well. So good afternoon, ma'am. I would like to ask, what is the most difficult part about writing for you? In addition, how do you handle literary criticism for your books and also misconceptions regarding Filipino chick lit and contemporary romance? So
Thank you.
parts yun.
The most difficult part of writing is always the time. There's never enough time, and you would think that working from home would give you time, and it doesn't. But also, I actually was most productive writing when I thought I didn't have a lot of time. So that was when my daughter had just been born. So the age of my daughter, like 0 to 5, that was when I wrote the most. And it's because but again, we're motivated by different things. So me being motivated by, if I don't do this, I will never be able to do anything, made me find time. When she actually started school and I had the time, I had hours where somebody else was minding her and somebody else was in charge of her welfare. I wrote nothing. I wrote because I knew I had time and did not write anything. I did not write a lot, and that's okay actually. So it's goals. It's really setting goals. So in my case, it was finding time, and it's okay. So a lot of writers were actually finding it hard to write in this pandemic, and or were gravitating toward different kinds of writing than what's expected of them or what they used to write, and that's okay. I think you should follow. You should be kind to yourself first and follow what you need. Do what you need to do. If you still want to write, then great. Find the time and find a topic that interests you. What was the next question? Sorry.
It's about criticism. Critiques about your work.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you handle?
How do you handle criticism?
I secretly feel bad, and but I actually recognize that it's needed. It's really needed. It's up to me to avoid seeing things that will affect me. But I also go through a mood where I think I'm stronger and actually seek out negative criticism, because that's when I see, for example, that someone will say, sometimes it's unfair. Again, it's what I mentioned earlier, that some people are judging books based on something missing that it's actually not meant to have. But sometimes it's fair. Sometimes, yes, like, isn't this, for example, isn't this just about privileged people? That's totally fair. And and because, yeah, who cares about privileged people? That's what that's fair. We don't need to be defensive about that. The book already exists because of privilege, so I don't need to defend having written it. And, I can accept, though, that there it's fair. It's a fair criticism, and we'll do what we can. And that's another thing, actually, about being your own publisher, is I actually I re-edited and released early editions of my book. So the my books that were released in the beginning of my career now have second and new editions, where I fixed a lot of things that I no longer feel is appropriate for someone to read at this time. And that's something that we can do. We can change in response to criticism. That's I'm okay with that. We can, of course, if you're the type of person who probably needs somebody. I think some writers, they let, like, their significant other or their best friend read their negative reviews, and then filter to tell them what what is most helpful, because we can't handle it ourselves. That's fair also, but you need somebody to tell you something like that. It's important. And then
Singit lang ako ulit. Because that's very interesting, Mina, ha. So if you feel that you have to revise your first few works, the first few novels you wrote, and to fix them in some way, then can you say that chick lit and romance genre is really is a malleable form, that it really has no fixed edition to it? You can change it.
I think that's fairly new. That's a fairly new concept, because if I had, for example, approached a publisher, they would have probably said no because of costs involved and whatever. But I'm publishing it. I get to decide. It's come to the point where it's long enough into the, like, it's been that long that the rights have reverted back to me, and I get to release a new edition anyway. And that's how I decided to revise it. And if you want examples for what I changed, it's very simple. It's like, hey, you lost weight, you look great. It's it's stuff like that I removed, because it affects. And I was asked about that. Why would you do that? And it's like, it affects nothing in the story. It's but it hurts somebody for real.
Yeah.
And there's no it there's it's not what the story is about at all, and can be removed easily without changing what the story is about. So it's a lot of things like that we're now learning makes a book better, or at least more inclusive, and our books usually didn't have. And it was and if anybody pointed it out before, that's fair, and thank you. And these things can be changed.
Oh, pero ang gandang ano yan, I think that's a good quality to the genre, that you can actually, it's malleable enough to keep up with the times, with current discourse.
That's true. But we'll have to pause a break muna. So, because it's almost near an hour, we'll have to take a break, and then we'll come back with the questions.
Mamangha sa lalim at ganda ng ating kultura at diwang makabayan sa mga salita at pahina. Sa tulong ng mga guro at manunulat ng panitikang Pilipino, halina't tuklasin ang yaman ng ating panitikan, ang pamana ng ating lahi. Kasama si Binibining Andrea Trinidad, Ginoong Alvin Yapan at Ginoong Gary De Viles ng Kagawaran ng Filipino ng Pamantasang Ateneo de Manila. Ito ang Sari-Sari